A new poll shows that most of the world sees woke America as a greater threat to democracy than Russia or China. In this video, we're going to take a look at the results of the poll, how big tech and the Biden administration are only proving the poll's results, and why woke cultural Marxism is so horrifically anti-democratic. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. We are your daily antidote to fake news as we analyze current events in light of larger conservative trends in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Also, a little heads up here. We got a big announcement coming up next week. This news involves changes going on in my life and is going to change this channel. So make sure to stay tuned for more to come on that. Let's start with our video question of the day. Do you believe that the United States is a greater threat to democracy than Russia or China? Let us know in the comment section below. Do you believe that the woke U.S. is one of the greatest threats to democracy? Because that is precisely what a brand new poll found in surveying a portion of the world's population. And we're going to see precisely why so many are so concerned about the current state of the United States. Before we dive in here, let's give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that's our good friends over at Noble Gold. Gang, if you're sick of all the low returns and volatility from the market, it is time to look at gold and silver, and that is where our good friends over at Noble Gold come in. Gang, there's just frankly never been a better time to start a gold or silver IRA in your portfolio, and our good friends, that amazing staff over at Noble Gold, they are ready to help you in any way that they can. If that's not incentive enough, Noble Gold is gifting a 1/10 ounce solid gold American Eagle proof coin with every qualifying IRA or 401k rollover. So do not wait. Click on that link below or visit their website at noblegoldinvestments.com or give them a call at 877-646-5347. Make sure to mention my name, Dr. Steve, and let's ride that gold wave together. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. A new poll of nations throughout the globe has some rather sober results for the left-wing activists disguised as politicians and journalists and university professors throughout our nation who claim to be the defenders of democracy. A survey of over 50,000 respondents all over the world from 50 different countries by the Alliance of Democracies Foundation found that an astonishing 44% of respondents believed that the United States was indeed a threat to democracy. Now, that number is frightening in and of itself, no question. But then, when compared to concerns about other nations, that percentage becomes all the more stark. Only 38% of respondents feared that China was a threat to democracy, and 28% believed that Russia was a considerable threat. Now, is that not fascinating? Nearly twice the amount of respondents believed that the United States was more of a threat to democratic government than that evil and horrible Putin Russia. So much for the Washington Post tagline, "Democracy dies in darkness." Now, it appears that for a significant portion of the world's population, democracy dies with woke politicians and a woke press. Now, the ultra-left rag The Guardian, which published the results of the study, they frankly have no idea why nearly half the world's surveyed population believes the United States is such a threat to democracy. They actually, believe it or not, they actually go so far as to say that it may be a hangover from the Trump years, which is so absurd. It was Trump that more than any other president de-escalated America's military role throughout the world, initiating troop withdrawals in Syria and Afghanistan and the like. This is just good old-fashioned secular leftist nonsense that the nationalist populist movements sweeping the world are somehow anti-democratic. The 2018 study by British scholars Roger Eatwell and Matthew Goodwin, they show that the nationalist populist movements, particularly in the United States and Europe, are emphatically not anti-democratic. In anything, national populists are opposed to certain aspects of liberal democracy. Or to put it another way, we're opposed to the way in which democracy is practiced by our leftist liberal permanent political class. Again, scholars have observed a fundamental difference between the politics of the permanent political class, which are often referred to as pragmatic democracy, versus the politics of the people, which by contrast is often referred to as redemptive democracy. Okay, so you've got pragmatic democracy and redemptive democracy. Pragmatic democracy is the rule by the establishment according to the values, interests, and concerns of the permanent political class, right? Values, interests, and concerns that are increasingly at odds with the values, interests, and concerns of the people. By contrast, the values, interests, and concerns of the people, right, the rank and file, the deplorables, the grassroots, that has as a consequence grown increasingly suspicious of the political class. And they, in fact, despise the political class and are working to restore a redemptive vision of democracy where the values of the people become the values of the political leadership. And the key here is that the two democracies are mutually exclusive. They operate by fundamentally different value systems. But to say that the Trumpist nationalist populists are growing and rising up all over the world as somehow anti-democratic is absurd. If anything, nationalist populist voters want more democracy. They want more referendums. They want more empathetic and listening politicians that give more power to the people and less power to established economic and political elites. This direct conception of democracy differs from the liberal one that has flourished across the West and which has gradually become more elitist in nature. And I would argue it's precisely the kind of democracy that more and more of the world's population actually see as a pseudo-democracy. This is not a rule by the people, but rather rule by an oligarchy made up of the political class, their cheerleaders in the mainstream Marxist media, and increasingly big tech and corporatist globalists. This is emphatically not a democracy that any nation in their right mind would want to have anything to do with, nor should they. Take a look at what the borderline illiterate Jen Psaki said, the spokesman for Biden. What she said the other day when it was announced that Facebook would continue to ban Trump from their increasingly irrelevant and outdated platform. When asked to respond to this blatant act of censorship, Psaki said, quote, "Well, let me first say that this is an independent board's decision, and we're not going to have any comment on the future of the former president's social media platform. President Joe Biden's view is that the major platforms have a responsibility related to the health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content, disinformation, and misinformation, especially related to COVID-19 vaccinations and elections." So I think I can translate that for you, right? We support the online censoring of American citizens. That's in effect what she said. We, the Democratic Party, support the oppression of information that we don't agree with or that makes us look bad. We are all for the censoring of information that we, leftist liberals, deem to be disinformation and misinformation. Now, is it any wonder the world sees the United States led by such absurdity, a threat to freedom? Or take this surmisal from the Federalists. It's very interesting. Critical race theory illuminates Democrats' master plan to end honest elections in America. The piece is by Chuck DeVore of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and he notes that cultural Marxists are very open and honest about what they consider to be, quote, fair elections. Fair elections have nothing to do with votes for them. There's nothing to do with you as an individual actually voting in a voting booth. Instead, fair elections have everything to do with racially determined voting proportions. This is why the Democrats are doing everything they possibly can to assault voting integrity when it comes to signature matching, right? Who cares if signatures match if the racial demographic is proportionally represented among the electorate? If blacks make up, say, 20% of the population in a particular district, they had better be represented by at least that percentage in the election. And that's all that matters. Individual signature verification be damned. It has no, in other words, voting is not an individual right. It's a collective group right. And Republicans, in insisting on the individual rights involved in voting, they're standing in the way of social justice. So there's no question that proponents of critical race theory are a very dangerous threat to the integrity of our democratic institutions. But it actually goes further. We can actually see how leftist cultural Marxism entails tyrannical censorship over people's lives. And that's because cultural Marxists operate according to something called radicalized perspectivalism. It's a fancy schmancy word to represent the notion that a singular group of people have a monopoly on the truth. Radical perspectivalism. And what we're seeing coming out of the Biden administration and its partners in the mainstream media as a whole, and increasingly big tech, is their notion that their highly leftist, globalist, Western liberal conception of the world represents reality in its absolute sense. And if you diverge from that, you're a legitimate object for censorship. You're peddling in disinformation and misinformation. But the fundamental problem here, of course, is that this radicalized perspectivalism negates the fundamental principle of a democratic society, which is known as the communication model of governance. And the communication model of governance simply states, you and I may have radically different political perspectives on things. We may come from very different religious traditions. We may be of different ethnicities, races, genders, and the like. But we can all come to common agreements about what's wrong with society and how to resolve it. That's what's known as the communication model of governance. We can communicate with one another. And it's foundational for any democratic society. What we're seeing with the rise of cancel culture and its radicalized perspectivalism is nothing less than the very real breakdown of a democratic society. The good news is that more and more populations around the world are obviously recognizing this, and they want nothing to do with our leftist globalist oligarchs, which means that the worldwide revolt against leftist cultural Marxism has just begun. Now, before you go, you definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded. It's on how Black Lives Matter activists have issued new demands on their website, all as the International Olympics Committee officially bans BLM demonstrations. We take a look at the latest demands by BLM activists, how they're basically jumping the shark and losing all credibility with these demands, and how even the Olympic Committee is pushing back against this radically far left and divisive movement. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.